Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoy here for the SoonerScoop.com studios. And at the end of the season, we're already at the end of the season previewing Oklahoma's opponents. And for the first time, Oklahoma will be headed down to Baton Rouge on November 30th. We welcome in Matt Brune from thebengaltiger.com. Matt, thanks for joining us. It's going to be, I guess, a long season, obviously, but this game will be there before you know it. Let's start with LSU just in general. Entering Brian Kelly's third season. Back-to-back 10-win years. I would imagine things have gone pretty well, or according to plan, as LSU fans would hope.
Yeah, obviously, like I said, back-to-back 10-win seasons. They do hit those numbers, in the bowl games. So nine wins in the regular season. First year making SEC championship, where you lose to Georgia, and then last year, you have you have one of the best offenses in the country, and then the defense is one of the worst in all of the Power Five.
Familiar
Which
for
really,
Oklahoma fans.
yeah. So it really was an interesting year. But yeah, going into year three for Brian Kelly, I think the expectations start to raise, even though you do lose Jaden Daniels and those two first round receivers. LSU will have one of the best offensive lines in the country. Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a very good quarterback. How good, we don't know yet, but he'll be good. The receivers are good. So the offense will be fine. And then they brought in an entirely new defensive staff with Blake Baker from Missouri. And, they still have Harold Perkins, still have some playmakers off the edge, but there are still some serious question marks for the defense.
Matt, tell us about Garrett Nussmeier, because obviously stepping into the shoes of a guy that won the Heisman Trophy is never easy. We've seen that at Oklahoma and kind of the expectations that come with that. Garrett's also a guy that's been in the program now a while, has played a little bit for LSU. What are just the expectations for him this year and the confidence level in him?
Yeah, I think confidence level is pretty high, and I think expectations are also high. He showed 2 years ago in the SEC championship game, Jaden Daniels gets knocked out and he plays the entire second half. When the game was still competitive for the third quarter, and then got away from him a little bit, but he played really well in that game. And then on the road against Alabama, they threw him in the fourth quarter when Jaden Daniels got knocked out again. Had some hits and misses in that game, and then in the bowl game against Wisconsin, he played the entire game. Daniels did not, and he was really, really good. So we know he has the arm talent. I mean, just you can go look up Garrett Nussmeier highlights, and it's just 60-yard bombs of him just on the move. I mean, it's an incredible talent at quarterback there. Now it's just about him maybe reining it in, not throwing interceptions, the decision-making part of it. So I personally think he's a top 10 quarterback in the country. I don't think that should be a hot take, but I think he's gonna. There's people who maybe don't know about him, to your point, but I think they'll learn fairly quickly.
Who are some of the guys as they look to replace Malik Neighbors, as they look to replace Brian Thomas? Who are some of the guys that LSU's kind of looking for to step up into those skill position roles, and then just overall offensively?
Yeah, Kyron Lacey's the first one. He was the third receiver last year, right behind Malik and Brian Thomas. I shouldn't say right behind, because those two were like 1,400-yard receivers, and then Kyron Lacey with, off the top of my head, I think it was like 500 or so, something like that. But he was a really good player. He still is a really good player, and now he'll be stepping up into that role. We've seen LSU time after time lose NFL receivers, and then the next year just pick up with whoever from Louisiana's next up. And Kyron Lacey is a little different. He's going into his fifth year. He's not a young guy, but I think physically he checks all the boxes. He's an awesome playmaker. Doesn't have the top end speed of Brian Thomas or Malik, but I think he's just going to be really good. And then you go down the list of they added C.J. Daniels from Liberty, who was a 1,000-yard receiver, 10 touchdowns, really good playmaker there. Xavier Thomas from Mississippi State. And then at tight end, I think Mason Taylor, who was injured last year, had a really strong freshman year in 2022. Obviously, he had the catch against Bama to win it in overtime. But then got hurt early last year, ankle injury, didn't move well. So this year you're hoping to get a revamped version of him, getting him comfortable again. So plenty of weapons for Nussmeier. Then, like I said, you have one of the best, if not the best, offensive lines in the country. Joe Moore Award finalist last year, and they returned 4 out of 5 starters.
Matt, you mentioned earlier a whole new defensive staff. That was a big talking point, I think, this offseason for LSU. What do you make of that new defensive staff? I know that they were busy in the transfer portal too on that side of the ball. What does that defense look like, and what makes you, I guess, give you some confidence that that'll look different this next year?
Yeah, I tried talking about the offense as long as I could, hoping we maybe ran out of time there. But no, the defense is going to be really interesting. An entirely new staff. Blake Baker, Bo Davis, defensive line coach, took him from Texas. That was a big get for them. Corey Raymond, who LSU fans are kind of hit or miss on right now. He went to Florida for a couple years, and now he's back at LSU, where he did have success earlier in his career at LSU with Ed Orgeron and whatnot. But I think a lot of it, when you start assessing this defense, they do have playmakers. Harold Perkins obviously being like the number one guy there. They're going to try to put him at inside linebacker to start the year, and kind of similar to what they did last year. But I think Blake Baker's in a much better position to coach him at that spot and to tailor his game maybe more so into that will linebacker spot. Because I do think at the next level he's going to have to play probably more inside linebacker. I think he was really good in coverage last year, Harold Perkins, where he had to play a lot of it, but ultimately he's going to be attacking for the most part. So you have him. You have guys like Braden Swinson off the edge who returns, Savion Jones off the edge, Deshaun Womack, who was a former five-star. So I think they have playmakers at linebacker and at defensive end. The questions come when you get to defensive tackle and the secondary, which, the defensive tackle spot is just completely dire. It's just an empty cupboard there. Between them and USC, I'm not sure there will be like zero defensive tackle plays in that game. But the secondary is interesting. They returned a lot of players, Major Burns, Sage Ryan. They added Jordan Gilbert from Texas A&M. So they have some veteran names, but ultimately there's still just a ton of question marks there.
It obviously sounds like the job for Blake Baker. It's going to be tough in year one as they try to rebuild. In terms of it sounds very familiar with what Oklahoma went through from about 2017 to as of recently. Is it almost a situation for the fans, at least, that it's like it can't get any worse? I think that there was a lot of Oklahoma fans that repeatedly said it was bad last year, but it can't get any worse.
Yes, it does feel like those, and obviously I'm not Oklahoma writer or anything like that, but just from the outside looking in, it does feel like those years where you have the Heisman quarterbacks come in and out, and then you're like, okay, figure out the defense. Yes, there is this feeling of that. I caution people because even if it can't get worse, how much it has to take a significant step forward this season, in my opinion, if LSU is going to make the playoffs. Because I don't expect the offense to be number one in the country again. I think it's going to be top 10. I think it'll be very good. I just can't go into the season saying it's definitely the number one offense in the country without, knowing Garrett Nussmeier and the receivers. So with that being the case, the defense is going to have to go from, heck, in every metric, it was outside the top 100 last year. So you're going to have to be at least in the probably 60, 70 range if you're going to make the playoffs. So a top 10 offense and a top 60 defense probably gets you there. Probably gets you to at least 9-3, maybe 10-2. But they're going to have to take a step forward, or else just being better than they were last year is not going to be good enough to LSU fans.
Matt, it seems like everybody we've talked to for this SEC preview show, we bring up the Oklahoma game, and they always say it's a big one because it could be a swing game, and that's how they view Oklahoma, as like Oklahoma could come in and win this game, or it could be a huge momentum changer for a team season. Obviously, being the last game on the schedule for both teams, I feel like these teams could walk in there at 8-3 or 9-2, and maybe that win puts them into the playoff discussion. How is LSU looking at that game, and how do you view that game, ending the season in Baton Rouge like that?
Yeah, I look at it just like you said. I think these are two teams that could come in with 8 or 9 wins and be playing, to potentially get in the playoff if everything goes right for both these teams. Now, that would be really interesting to have that game in Baton Rouge as like almost like a play-in game to a degree. Because I don't know if I don't think LSU or Oklahoma are projected to get to the SEC championship per game. So this very well could be the last, game before the playoff. I think LSU to this point, the schedule for LSU is kind of, I don't want to say front loaded, but Ole Miss, A&M, and Alabama are all before like November 10th. And so then it's Florida, then Vanderbilt, then Oklahoma. So you do have a nice runway if you are LSU to kind of go into this game at home with some expectations of winning it. Who knows where these two teams will be coming in? I did a whole series looking at every single team, that or not every team, 9 of the 12 teams, because the Vanderbilt, South Alabama, and Nichols game didn't make it. But yeah, I looked at Oklahoma, and I think this is going to be obviously a big game for LSU's playoff chances, but I think just for Brian Kelly in general, not saying he's on the hot seat, but if you lose this game to Oklahoma at home to end the year and then don't make the playoffs, then you have a fan base that has an entire offseason to sit on that loss, and no matter what you do in a bowl game, will not be happy. So I definitely think it's a big game for LSU, and I'm interested to see how these teams come into it in late November.
It feels like it's been a long time coming, and we've been asking everybody, Matt, just in terms of OU and Texas joining the SEC. I think that the celebrations or whatever in Norman and Austin seemed a little anticlimactic, just in terms of it had been known for so long that these teams were coming to the SEC. From the LSU side of things and the fan base, how has Oklahoma and Texas been received, I guess, would be my question, just in terms of, is there excitement? I think there obviously a lot of excitement here in Norman, but in Baton Rouge, what has been the temperature of the fan base, just in terms of OU and Texas joining the SEC?
Yeah, I think for LSU, there are so many recruiting battles, I think, with A&M and Texas, and then there's the occasional one with Oklahoma, but I feel like A&M and Texas just really rub LSU fans the wrong way. So it's kind of just, obviously you have that natural butting of heads.
Sure.
There. I think the Oklahoma standpoint of it, me personally, I think it's awesome to add Oklahoma and Texas in this, and just further raise the level of competition you have on a year in, year out basis. Obviously, it changes some of the rivalry games where you're not going to play Mississippi State and Ole Miss, or maybe Arkansas every single year. So that's a change for LSU fans. But ultimately, you get these games against Oklahoma at the end of the year like this, and it just, you forget about the last 70 years relatively quickly, because now you're in a new age of college football where Oklahoma and Texas bring that brand name, bring the exposure, bring those ratings, and obviously the revenue just continues to shoot up in what is just an incredible college football landscape right now. So yeah, I think overall, if between Oklahoma, Texas, and A&M, I think LSU fans are the warmest to Oklahoma. But yeah, it's definitely with all the recruiting battles with A&M and Texas, it's just been constantly it's been a battle for LSU and for LSU fans going back and forth with those guys.
Matt, I know, but before we get you out of here, I know a lot of OU fans have this game as one circled as one that they kind of want.
There's a lore about Tiger Stadium,
right?
Hopefully a Saturday night. We'll see.
Right, making that trip down to Baton Rouge. I know there's also a group of OU fans that remember the 2004 Sugar Bowl. And maybe don't remember their interaction with LSU fans as fondly from that game. But what's some advice for OU fans that might be making the trip down to Baton Rouge? What's some places that they definitely need to check out, maybe before or after the game?
Yeah, a lot of the places near the stadium will obviously just be swarmed. So I was going to say Mike Anderson's, but that's kind of relatively close. So I don't know how close you can get there. But there's plenty of food spots around town. I think if you just get in there early enough, and obviously Oklahoma and all these places have great tailgating scenes, but just if you get there early enough to take in the LSU tailgating scene and just interact with fans, I've seen a lot of rival fans go and just enjoy the tailgate, and LSU fans be very, very receptive of them. So I think if you're an Oklahoma fan going down for the first time, get there early, enjoy the tailgating scene. There are plenty of crawfish places. The game's on November 30th, so actually you're probably not going to get much crawfish at that point. But seafood spots, and you'll be able to make it work. Hopefully it's not too cold on that day, but yeah, get there early and just have some fun. Most Louisiana people, from my experience, I am from Texas, but Louisiana people in my experience here have been very warm, or at least before the game.
Yeah,
sure. It seems like it's one of those things that as you get over, like, oh, this is a gauntlet at the end of Oklahoma's schedule. But you do get a trip to Baton Rouge, and I know there are a lot of Oklahoma fans that are excited about that. He is Matt Brune from BengalTiger.com, and it's going to be a big one coming up on November 30th. Matt, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me.
Thanks, Matt.